a public inquiry into money laundering in BC. Legislative Bureau Chief, you see him there, Keith Baldry. You were at that press conference, Keith. What was your big takeaway this morning?
Big takeaway really is David Eby's assurance that the federal government's actually going to cooperate in this. I still will believe that when I see it. It's hard to see how an inquiry is going to be effective if the RCMP and FinTrack, which is the financial transaction unit based in the federal government, don't cooperate fully. The RCMP have a history of not cooperating with public inquiries. In fact, they're fighting the National Missing Women's, Indigenous Women's Commission of Inquiry as well, and they've been fighting that for a long time. So that's a big stumbling block Austin Cullen has to get over. Bill Blair, the federal minister, assures David Eby the feds will cooperate. Eby says that's good enough for him, but we'll see just what the level of cooperation is going forward. Other than that, we were going to be interested, of course, in the terms of reference, and it's pretty clear, as both the Premier and the Attorney made the point on a number of occasions, Austin Cullen has a pretty wide open field here. He can run wherever he wants, and he can go back as far in time as however he wants. So he has been asked to target certain sectors: gaming, real estate, financial institutions, horse racing, luxury goods, banking services, loan companies. So it's a pretty wide open field for him to take a look at. And I wonder, again, the time frame seems short to me. Public inquiries can go on a long time. He's got 18 months for an interim report. He can probably make that. But a final report by May 2021, that's an aspirational goal. We'll see if he can hit that mark. But he's got a lot of work set out in front of him.
Yeah, and in that same breath, Keith, I mean, interesting talking about that and hearing Eby talk about some people in the luxury car market who maybe weren't being very open and honest about this during the German report. I want to talk to you about Justice Austin Cullen here, because they said, sure, he can do this, he can testify, get people under oath, but does that not just allow these criminals to lawyer up, so to speak, and now they have the protection of the law?
Yeah, everybody's allowed a lawyer. If you're compelled as a witness to testify in front of a public inquiry, you are entitled to a taxpayer-funded lawyer. And this is one of the problems with public inquiries. And David Eby and John Horgan have been very upfront about this in the past. Today they're talking about the need for one and how it's going to work. They have been quite critical of public inquiries in the past on precisely that point. Everybody lawyers up. It's paid for by the taxpayers. The costs mount and mount. And there's no guarantee that someone will actually testify. As well, under the Inquiry Act, no one can be compelled to give testimony that incriminates themselves, and no one can be charged with any crime based on the evidence they give forth in a public inquiry. So there are limitations to what a public inquiry can do, and I expect a lot of lawyers are going to be very busy in front of Mr. Cullen in the months and years ahead, arguing that their client should not be testifying. We saw this in the so-called Bingo Gate inquiry in the 1990s, commissioned by the NDP government to basically look at some NDP fundraising activities that were quasi-criminal. Very few people actually testified in that thing, and all the lawyers got involved, and it was shut down by the subsequent BC Liberal government, who said even though this was making political hay out of their enemies, the political enemies, the NDP, it really wasn't doing anything because all it was lawyers arguing. So it's no guarantee it's going to be a shining success, but there's also no guarantee that it won't be. It could very well shed a light on areas that we haven't really seen much light shed before. Whether or not it results in somebody going to jail or something, that's not what public inquiries do. It can lead to putting out information that makes the Crown take a second look at something and maybe go after individuals, but it's going to be an interesting road ahead for Mr. Cullen to see exactly how many people testify and how many people actually do pay some sort of legal penalty as a result.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the big question is, how do we solve the problem? Look, a lot of that has happened in the past. That is a huge issue. Obviously, it's an issue, and the amount of money that has gone through BC and been laundered, it's crazy how much has gone through. But solving the issue, that's a big part of that. And you kind of touched on that in your first answer, but how much of this is politicized, knowing that in 2021, in the fall, we have that provincial election, and they wanted to happily to end just ahead of that in May of 2021?
Well, it depends, again, where Mr. Cullen goes in this. And this is one of the reasons why governments are reluctant to commission these types of inquiries. They have no control over the inquiry. Once the terms of reference are set and the commissioner is hired, well, it's now Austin Cullen's show here. It's got nothing to do with Eby or Horgan anymore, and he's free to do what he wants. And keep in mind, Peter German's report on real estate covered the year 2018. That was the year NDP was in power, not the BC Liberals. So if Mr. Cullen goes backwards, that's going to be problematic for the BC Liberal government. If he goes backward, but also focuses on today, today, that could be problematic for the NDP when this report lands, if it lands in front of the voters just a few months before the election. I would bet it would make the BC Liberals look worse than the New Democrats. At least the NDP is taking steps to sort of clean up this mess, but there's no guarantee that the NDP is not going to be a bit in the soup on this either. If Mr. Cullen goes back to the 1990s, which is when the casino industry was created in this province, that was created by the NDP government, and he may find overturn some stones there that governments don't like to be overturned. And that's, again, one of the reasons why governments are reluctant to call these things, because they're independent and they go places where they want to go, and not all governments are comfortable with that.
Yeah, and politicized or not, I thought it was a good line by Horgan when he said, we don't know the cost yet, but it's already cost taxpayers so much money. So he knows exactly who his audience is. Okay, busy day for you, Keith. We'll check in with you again soon. Thanks so much.
All right.
Just last year, $5 billion was funneled through BC's housing market. $47 billion was the amount laundered across Canada. As a result, homes are less affordable for people. Now, today, British Columbia launched a full public inquiry. But while the BC government takes action and shows leadership, federal Liberals have been on the sidelines. Will the Prime Minister finally show some leadership, agree to launch a joint public inquiry, and fully cooperate with the province of British Columbia?
Hear, hear. Well, Minister of Border Security.
Mr. Speaker, our government takes the threat posed by money laundering very seriously, and that's precisely why, Mr. Speaker, we introduced in Budget 2019 significant new measures and significant new investments to increase the RCMP, CBSA, and FinTrack's ability to deal with this issue. We've been working very closely with the Attorney General of British Columbia. I spoke to him just yesterday. I've assured him of our full cooperation and support in their inquiry. But, Mr. Speaker, we are not standing idly by. We brought forward new measures. It created new offences, new regulatory authorities, and new resources to deal effectively with this issue.